Downtown Kirkwood. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Justin Randall. I am the president of the St. Louis section of the Missouri APA. And today I've got the privilege to introduce three guest speakers to go through the shaping of the future of downtown Kirkwood. Today we have with us Catherine Hamacher. And she is a senior project manager at PGAV and has a background in urban planning and community engagement. She has organized large town halls and social media strategies to lead strategic planning efforts for a number of planning and organizational development projects. Also, we have Jonathan Reich. He is the director of community development in Kirkwood. And Jonathan has a bachelor's and master's degree in urban planning from the University of Illinois Champaign, and has began his career in Joplin, Missouri, and has now worked in the St. Louis area for the last several years. And in April 2020, became the Planning and Development Service Director in Kirkwood. And also today speaking on behalf of the City of Kirkwood is Amy Lowry. She is has received her master's degree in public administration and urban planning from the University of Colorado at Denver. She's worked in Georgia for the Atlanta Regional Commission in Government Services in the City of Ackworth in historic preservation, tourism, and downtown economic development. She started working for the City of Kirkwood in 2012 and has been a full-time planner there since 2016 with engagement in the adoption of Envision Kirkwood 2030 comp plan and downtown master plan. So with that, I will turn it over to our speakers and look forward to hearing about the downtown Kirkwood plan.
So good morning, everybody. I'm going to take you through the beginnings of some of our recent efforts in Kirkwood, which is our 2035 comp plan that was adopted in the summer of 2017. A downtown master plan that was adopted in May of 2019, and then a downtown commercial market study. Just a little bit of background about Kirkwood. It's often touted as the first planned suburb west of the Mississippi River. I don't know if that's true or not, but we like to say it is. So in 1852, Kirkwood Association, which was basically an organization of real estate speculators, they purchased land from 3 area families, and they mapped out 40 city blocks divided by 60-foot public right-of-way. The city was incorporated in early 1853 by the state legislature, and the first Missouri Pacific Depot was erected near downtown. A commuter train arrived in May for an auction of development lots. And all of those development lots were sold by 1863, and the Kirkwood Association disbanded. But obviously the railroad was very important to the founding of the town and to the development. The town itself is named for the chief engineer of the railroad, James P. Kirkwood. And we had commuter trains running until 1961. Currently, the city owns the train station, and it serves as an Amtrak station for 2 to 4 trains a day, depending on how much funding Amtrak has, in addition to numerous freight trains rolling through downtown. So we are an inner ring older suburb, about 14 miles west of St. Louis City. This is just sort of a view of downtown and a portion of the city. The commercial core of downtown is a National Register Historic District, so that's outlined in the red dashed lines. And we also have numerous local historic districts that are outlined in blue, and local landmarks, which are the purple shields you see throughout this map. Downtown businesses consists of offices, restaurants, retail stores. City Hall is located downtown, as well as our police department. And the Downtown Special Business District runs a seasonal farmers market and a Christmas tree lot. There's also about 1,200 multifamily units within about half a mile of downtown, including then also single family homes on either side and north and south of the downtown area. So we started the 2035 comp plan in 2014. It was an initiative to reflect the vision and goals of the community, strike a balance between the demands of land use and development, protect valued community resources, shape the physical appearance of the community and foster a sense of place, and also provide guidance for future decisions. We gathered census and land use and other data and identified initial issues and concerns from stakeholder interviews. And the city had hired an outside consultant for the public engagement and the vision. So the efforts in the Envision Kirkwood 25 comp plan consisted of a steering committee that was made up of 20 residents and representatives from our city boards and commissions, representatives from the school board and from the business community. And the steering committee met 7 times over a period of 5 months to develop the guiding principles for the plan. And those guiding principles were the guiding principles that the community shall look to create a community that embraces diversity of housing and neighborhoods to support citizens of all ages and socioeconomic backgrounds, a community that is enriched by healthy lifestyle choices, a community with well-maintained infrastructure that is accommodating to multiple modes of transportation, a community that takes proactive professional approach to economic development in order to enhance existing commercial and industrial areas, and a community with cooperative institutions and organizations working towards shared goals. So as I said, the comp plan had a steering committee. We also had a technical advisory committee that was made up of 14 city staff representing all the staff departments. And on that technical committee, we did have a representative from East West Gateway. That technical advisory committee met 13 times over 18 months to provide feedback on the plan and a realistic assessments of what might be accomplished under short, medium, and long timeframes. We had a project website with a single source of information, and the website also had 5 mini online surveys to elicit specific information from the public, as well as 2 longer surveys for feedback on the goals and objectives that we were putting forth in the project. We had multiple open houses and information booths at community events, and we used email blasts, yard signs, utility bill mailings, and stories in the local Webster Kirkwood Times to keep the public informed about the process. So the comp plan was adopted in summer 2017, and it concludes with an implementation schedule on action items with short quarterly and longer annual updates that are supposed to be provided by staff to the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding progress on the goals and objectives. So that's this end point of the timeline here, monitoring the progress and amending as needed. The plan also specifies that every 5 years, a citizen committee should be formed to evaluate the plan and recommend amendments as needed. So just looking at that, that would be summer 2022. And I don't think that's on our radar yet. Maybe it's on Jonathan's, but just going through this, I've discovered that that's something that we need to move to. The comp plan did specify certain goals for downtown. Those included enhancing downtown with entertainment options. So we were looking to support the development of a new performing arts center, attracting a boutique hotel to serve downtown, and also supporting a balance of mixed use residential in the downtown area. So we were looking to establish adaptive reuse program for older buildings and encourage mixed use development. Those were the downtown goals. We also had goals citywide that do tie in with downtown as well. And those goals were to preserve historic buildings and neighborhoods, to promote housing to accommodate residents of various ages, abilities, and socioeconomic needs, provide a more walkable and bikeable community, promote efficient and safe movement of people and goods, and evaluate and update parking standards. And finally, to promote Kirkwood as a business-friendly community. So those were the major goals. The comp plan also identified 6 smaller geographic areas of the city for sub-plans that would allow a more in-depth evaluation and more detailed land use, development, and improvement details. So the downtown was designated as one of those areas. And so we had recommendations for what that area plan should look at. And those recommendations were new development or infill development should be pedestrian oriented in order to complement the historic building pattern of downtown. We wanted to promote increased residential density in the form of mixed use and live work units. We wanted to pursue efforts to promote year-round use and extended hours at our farmers market, which is located right here. We wanted to, at that time, we knew we were pursuing a new performing arts center, which went in this area here. But the plan was for the city to come up with a way to promote redevelopment of properties that were immediately adjacent to that. We were looking at considering a reduction of traffic lanes on Kirkwood Road between Adams Avenue and Bodley Avenue, which is in this area right here. And we were also looking at evaluating the potential for conversion of large surface parking areas north of Adams Avenue. So that's up in this area here. We can see the gray. We had looking at what we could do with those large surface parking areas. We were evaluating the potential for conversion of those parking lots and evaluating the potential for a hotel within downtown. We also consider we're going to use this sub-area plan to consider expanding the boundaries of the special use, special business district, which right now is was the red right here outlined. So would we want to expand? That was the question. And we were pursuing the creation of a downtown master plan to help guide growth and development in the downtown area. So that's what we were looking at on the comp plan with what we wanted to do with downtown. And now Jonathan's going to take you through the next step of the phase of our planning of downtown.
Great. Thanks, Amy. So yeah, and Amy set the stage. We wanted to take you all through this kind of progression of planning. Obviously, the comp plan was community-wide, but Amy set the stage well for everyone to understand that's the next steps are downtown master plan, and then the commercial market study that Catherine will talk about. These are all building upon that work, right? That very in-depth public process that we had through the comp plan process is really what's guiding us still as we go forward. So Amy mentioned the downtown was a sub area identified, and all those areas were recommended for further study and analysis. And that was really one of the two main pieces prompting this effort that the city conducted. In doing this, we obviously, Kirkwood has a good history, as Amy mentioned too, and we have a fairly good reputation for our downtown. But we wanted to make sure that we were not getting stagnant and making sure that we were staying relevant, and no disrespect to the things that were here before. But again, we wanted to build upon the success that Kirkwood has in its downtown. And ultimately, the city council decided that this was a good step to help renew that interest in downtown. And I'll talk about implementation at the tail end of the presentation, but we really did see it was pretty amazing after this investment in the studies, and these studies, plural, we did see an increase in calls, contacts, interest in development, and property owners discussion. So it has been successful for us. So anyway, so we went through an RFQ process for this first study, the Downtown Master Plan, as we called it. And ultimately, DPZ Co-Design, or DPZ Partners, was the firm that we went with for this piece. They partnered with Jacobs Engineering, and it's important to mention that for a couple of reasons. I really think one of the main reasons that there was community support for this study being done is because we paired it with a parking study. So the study was funded primarily, well, $120,000 from our Industrial Development Authority as an effort to help further economic development in the city. And then the city general fund, city council chipped in another 80 for a total budget of 200,000. But really on the onset of the project, it seemed like more people were interested in the parking study, the results of the parking study, and focused quite a bit on that. And so we, I think as good planners do, we jumped on that chance to include that into a larger study, make it a little more comprehensive, and included it and rolled it in. Anyway, so I'll get into that a little bit more on the parking side later too. So the process for this, again, we were building off of a lot of public input on the comp plan side. However, I'm sure you're all familiar with DPZ and their form-based and urban design focusing. So this was a lot about a visioning process once you get past the data and the parking study side of it. But so the public process portion of this, obviously this is the 1 week intensive charrette that they proposed and we did conduct, and it was very successful in my opinion. But you know, there's obviously a lot of work being done predating this and after this, but I wanted to show the schedule just to give an idea for anybody who wasn't part of it, that this was the main public process portion of this specific study. And so it included focus group meetings in the mornings with the consultants, and open studio time every day, varying depending on the day, so that residents, individuals could come by, stop in City Hall, up in the council chambers, and just see what they were working on, talk with the consultants, give their ideas and thoughts about their vision for downtown Kirkwood. And it was well attended and well received. We also had an opening presentation that was conducted on Tuesday of that week, and then a very quick turnaround with the final presentation of findings and initial findings and work that was done throughout the week on Thursday. We had the photos there at the bottom shows standing room only in our council chambers, probably close to or over 100 people attending. And I've never seen this before, but one resident came up and gave flowers to the consultant. So, you know, I mean, they made a very good presentation, got good excitement and energy in the project. Which was important and helped us build upon that to try to implement some of these things. So let's see. So that was an overview of the process. You can go to the next one, Amy. There we go. So as I mentioned, one big piece of this, and really probably the reason we got the funding we did from the city, was because we were going to look at downtown parking and the need for it. There's been a long perception in Kirkwood, and I'm sure a lot of other similar downtown areas, that there's just not enough parking downtown. But from a planning perspective, we know there's a lot, probably too much surface parking from a land use perspective. So DPZ really did a good job at helping us with Jacob's help on the data. So Jacobs went out and did field studies, parking demand evaluations and observations, and summarize those, showing what the true demand was throughout the downtown. Ultimately, we found, not too much of a surprise, there were hot spots, a couple blocks here and there that had, you know, over 100% demand at some times. But you get one or two blocks away and there's still parking available. We have the railroad tracks that traverse through the middle of downtown, and so there's some reluctance to walk across the railroad tracks, and are people not thinking about it from a perception basis, because we do have a couple parking garages that are publicly accessible on the other side. But anyway, these are one of the images that DPZ provided that got one of the biggest reactions, was this comparison of downtown Kirkwood to the Galleria Mall. And obviously, you know, just the idea of comparing the length of the mall and walking from one side of the mall or the parking lot of the mall to the other. And it's a little bit of a stretch maybe, but I think the point landed home, and people, it really got people thinking, and created that paradigm shift for many residents, not all. We still have some disbelievers, I'm sure, but overall, this was really instrumental in setting the stage and allowing people to open their minds to think about what else can be done downtown. Up until then, in my opinion, my experience, it was just a lot of hesitancy for density or new development without ensuring, you know, parking at a suburban parking rate. Let's see. So yeah, so DPZ used the data to build upon the support, to gather support for the ability of downtown to support denser development. And their focus was on quality and style development. Oh, Amy, go back for a second. I missed the point at the bottom of the slide. So the ultimate finding that I always keep in my mind was that really through the engineering parking demand study, they found that 90 to 113% of the parking demand, so almost all to oversupply, was provided downtown just by public parking, on street or off street public parking. So they broke down parking as public, on street, off street, private restricted, and private unrestricted. And so it was I think that was a big takeaway in saying, you know what, even if no private parking was there, we're right in line with the parking demand that's in reality out there. So anyway, okay, go ahead, Amy. All right, so let's see. Sorry. So the next step after tackling some of those concerns was really creating the vision. So they are, you know, this DPZ is very urban design focused, and they provided this illustrative plan, as they called it. And it was really, again, to provide vision. The intent was not to say that certain property owners had to develop this way, or this is the way we really think it should be necessarily, but to provide examples to the public and to property owners to say, here's potential of types of developments, types of buildings that could meet the objectives, the input that we've heard, and how it could be incorporated throughout downtown Kirkwood. So I don't think it's on this slide. So this is a view specifically looking on let's see, Monroe, looking toward the new Performing Arts Center, and that corridor identified. And at the bottom of the screen, on the bottom right, this is a sub area. They did a lot of these breakouts throughout downtown to show potential, and the Performing Arts Center's in the middle there. And we control property around that. So that was a big focus, and still is, about potential for redevelopment in that area. But again, a big focus of the study was providing the vision first based on the input received, and then figure out how to get there. So you can go ahead, Amy. And one of the big things that came out of it before I jump into the framework was housing. And I keep mentioning, or I have mentioned, denser development. Historically, so Kirkwood obviously has had mixed use and residential in the downtown sprinkled throughout historically. But there's actually, through the 80s and maybe into the 90s too, there was a concern that there was too much housing development downtown, or too many condos, and we were taking up too much commercial space, and it was going to be detrimental to downtown Kirkwood and the commercial side of it. So DPZ focused a lot on this in the city. A lot of residents and community picked up a lot about it, about how to create additional housing through mixed use and through something called missing middle housing, which I'm sure most or all of you are familiar with now. So bridging that gap between detached single family housing and larger multifamily buildings. So a lot of recommendations focus on that. But one piece that really gave us a springboard to give the community some comfort in saying, yes, we should be encouraging this because residential supports commercial and creates that energy. You get the rooftops, you get the feet, the customers there, it's synergy for the mixed use downtown. So in order to do that, we had to create a framework that allowed us to regulate where residential development without commercial could occur. So it acts a little bit like an overlay district. We didn't adopt it exactly as that. But this framework plan allowed for implementation of many recommendations from the study. So what you see here, basically the red line streets, the solid red line streets were recommended. This is as it's amended, actually. So this wasn't the original recommendation from DPZ. We've refined it over the past couple of years, but the solid red would require a commercial component. So if you're going to do residential on one of those streets, you have to have commercial. And I won't get into the details of it, but we do dictate how much how much commercial that would be. The dashed lines would be suggested commercial, so not required, but kind of a second tier where we'd like to see it. And then if you were in this area in our downtown B2 zoning district, but on a street not marked red, you could have multifamily development without a commercial component. So I'll mention that in implementation, but we did amend the code based on this to create multifamily residential as a permitted use and codified this framework plan to dictate where that could happen. Let's see. There's a lot of other code amendments that I'll get into later. So it was a successful project. We actually had the consultant come back a year later to kind of give a refresher presentation, because even a year later there was confusion and questions about the purpose and some of the things, but it was a good process, and still working on the support that was gathered through this. So I think so one of the recommendations of this master plan was also to do a more in-depth commercial market study. And that's where PGAV came in and helped us refine this and further give back up to this framework plan as well as other recommendations. I'll hand it over to Catherine.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Amy. So hi everyone, my name is Catherine Hamacher and I'm an urban planner at PGAV. So as Jonathan mentioned, PGAV was engaged as a follow-up to the downtown plan to conduct a commercial market study of the downtown area. So what we were doing there was really considering the different mix of uses. So where are the commercial areas, where are the non-commercial areas, as Jonathan was pointing out on that framework plan, thinking about what the mix is like now and what would be the optimal mix. Also thinking about the perception of too many non-retail uses. That's something that community members had talked about, that there felt like there were a lot of things that weren't retail, and how could we encourage a more diverse mix. We were also interested in understanding how downtown functions. So thinking about where revenue comes in and out, what time of day people are visiting downtown, where are the physical connections between the different uses, and really understanding how the downtown functions as its own little economy. And then we were tasked with evaluating the framework plan. So the framework plan Jonathan just spoke about, given the findings of the commercial market study, what were our recommendations about how that framework plan could be altered to support the economic development and the environment that they were hoping to encourage in downtown Kirkwood. We also were tasked with evaluating the potential for a hotel. So that's something that came out of the comprehensive plan. And then again, in the downtown master plan, the discussion came up again. And so part of the commercial market study looked at locations for where that could go, how it could survive, what the competition is like in the area, and really trying to determine if that was feasible. And then we also provided recommendations for the types of businesses that could be supported in downtown to increase that mix they were interested in. So based on all of that, so what we went out and did is we took a lot of the data and the engagement that had been done in the past. We added on top of that some of the information about business permits, current businesses, occupancy, all those kinds of things based on, when we started our study. So what's the environment like at the beginning, and then sought to provide recommendations for businesses, for code recommendations, and then for site recommendations. So given what we feel like the market in downtown Kirkwood is and what it could be, what are some of these recommendations that could help encourage that? So I'm going to run through a few of these. So in terms of business recommendations, so again, we inventoried the businesses that do exist. We talked to folks about what kinds of businesses they'd like to see. We pulled out information from the comp plan and downtown master plan, and then thought, okay, given that Kirkwood exists in this larger environment of St. Louis County and the St. Louis region, what could really be supported in downtown Kirkwood? And so what we determined is that there was a real focus on local retail and encouraging unique businesses. We suggested a retail district plan to really get more specific about the types of retail that residents and visitors would like to see in downtown Kirkwood. And then more restaurants. That's something everybody said. It's something even restaurant owners in downtown Kirkwood said, that we should focus on healthy and sustainable, unique restaurants. We looked at the kinds of restaurants that have been successful in downtown Kirkwood and in other similar places, and to focus on that social experience, on the fact that people visit Kirkwood because, well, residents visit Kirkwood because of the convenience, but lots of other people visit Kirkwood because of that experience they get in downtown Kirkwood. And so leveraging that to think about the kinds of restaurants that could really be successful. There was also a lot of discussion about expanded hours. So one of the things we did is looked at the time of day that different businesses were open and what spaces in downtown were active at different times. And what we realized is that there was a real opportunity for additional morning breakfast options, whether it's for people to grab breakfast before they take their kids to school, or for people to have meetings before they go to their offices in Kirkwood. There was a real opportunity for activating the downtown in a different time of the day. We also looked at a boutique hotel. So again, this is something that's been talked about quite a bit, but understanding the feasibility of that, where could it go? How big of a hotel did we feel like downtown Kirkwood could support? We looked at things like the number of riders on the Amtrak that stops in downtown Kirkwood every day, where those folks are coming from, the percentage of people that we imagined we could capture for a hotel, and then also playing on the Performing Arts Center and the other assets in downtown Kirkwood that might help support a hotel. There's also a lot of thinking about how to invest in the farmers market. So farmers market is a huge asset for downtown Kirkwood. It is its own sort of mini economy. A lot of businesses have sort of incubated at the farmers market and then opened brick and mortar businesses. And so figuring out strategic investments to help support the farmers market and ensure that there is a real direct line between farmers market to brick and mortar business, all in downtown Kirkwood. And then lastly, we suggested co-working and shared spaces. We found that it was a bit of a missing middle for Kirkwood in terms of office space. So there's lots of office space in Kirkwood and a shocking number, I thought, of folks coming to work every day in downtown Kirkwood. There seemed to be a bit of a gap in terms of spaces that were maybe smaller, maybe offered drop-in hours, things like that, that would perhaps open downtown Kirkwood up to a new kind of business market. So the next thing we did was provide code recommendations. So this is that framework plan that came out of the downtown master plan. And given what we felt like, so this is the one that was included in the downtown master plan. And part of our task was to look at this. And then given the recommendations from the market study, given what updated information has told us about how Kirkwood is functioning, what would be the recommendations for how to update this to then support the economic development environment they were hoping for? And so we recommended a few things. We recommended some additional distinguishing between suggested and mandatory commercial. So in the previous plan, while it had different names, it didn't necessarily distinguish what that meant. And so we recommended that they distinguish that and actually, delineate that where mandatory commercial is, you need to have some specific rules about what that means. We also suggested expanding mandatory commercial along North Kirkwood, just a little bit further north than what was originally suggested, to help draw that density a little bit further north and ensure that walkable pedestrian environment was still there, even just a little bit north of the sort of traditional downtown. And then we suggested some suggested commercial on parts of Washington, Adams, and Clay, just to again bring the the commercial environment a little bit further out from that center and make sure that while we are encouraging the residential environment, we're also ensuring that the places where it makes the most sense to keep that commercial, that is part of the code. So then the last piece we did was look at some of the site recommendations. So part of the downtown market study suggested several sites that perhaps could be considered for redevelopment. And these came from the downtown plan where there were some recommended sites to think about increased density, think about how you could change the feel of downtown Kirkwood as a pedestrian, you could encourage some additional economic development. And so what we worked with the city of Kirkwood on was creating a 3D model of the city and then sort of dropping in some different examples of what could be. And so we thought about, what would it be like to replace building X with a denser building? How would that impact both the look and feel of the street, but then also how many more residents could that potentially add? What would that mean in terms of revenue? If we're thinking about a hotel, where could a hotel potentially fit physically in downtown Kirkwood? And so, we looked at available sites and sort of plopped down some different 3D buildings to think about, what would the impact of these things be? And part of the reason we included this in the market study was to help with implementation. And so to think about how the ideas and the policies and the framework that came from these previous plans would really look in real life. And then how could the staff at the City of Kirkwood really bring that into, when folks come to them with developments, how could they use this information moving forward? So I'm going to turn it to Jonathan, I think, who's going to talk a little bit more about the 3D piece.
Thanks, Catherine. So yeah, I think going into the commercial market study, I certainly personally, I didn't anticipate getting a 3D model for our downtown as a result of it, but in working through it with PGAV, with Catherine and other folks at PGAV, it seemed like a very positive product they could share with us. Amy, if you want to go to the next one. That would be impactful, an impactful tool for us going forward. So Catherine mentioned they looked at specific sites that were identified in the downtown master plan as underutilized and redevelopment potential and built those out a little further with specific site recommendations. But here's an overview. I mean, at the end, I just want to kind of show everyone we were able to well, they provided the raw data to us and we were able to integrate this into our internal GIS system. So we have a downtown 3D model that's interactive. And Amy, if you want to go to the next one, this just shows all of downtown. This zooms in a little bit to Adams and Kirkwood Road. You see a purplish building there on the left side. Ooh. And then you see the bank drive-through on the right. So the bank drive-through is Commerce Bank, and then a circular building to the north, Amy, with UMB. So these are sites that were identified pretty early on, and we've actually had, if you go to the next slide, Amy, we've had some ability. So throughout the projects, we've had projects since this proposed. Now, while this tool wasn't really ready through those P&Z processes, we unfortunately weren't able to get comfortable enough with presenting this to our commission in time while these projects were going through, but I did want to provide it's been received pretty well, and I think it'll have a good impact going forward. Our intention is to require these 3D models for developments downtown so that we can see the visual impact from a height perspective, bulk perspective, and then the tools with GIS, and I'm not by any means an expert at it, but they have, you can do the shadow cast. So you see, everyone, one of the complaints you get about height in downtown is it's going to, cast a shadow on my property all day or whatever. So there's a lot of things that is kind of an added value, I think, of this project that we're going to be able to use going forward. So I just thought it was a fun piece to show. All right, so I'm going to try to wrap this up talking about implementation. So and not just code, because I do have a slide on that, but some of the more exciting things, visual things. So this really wasn't the Performing Arts Center, in full disclosure, was something that was in the works prior to our downtown master plan. It's an effort from our Parks Department, City Council. There were bonds issued, capital project based on the city. So approximately $25 million Performing Arts Center. built on city property on the edge of the eastern edge of downtown. We actually expanded and rezoned the property to our B2 downtown district to help show the intention, the city's intention to expand downtown towards this, support this. But this was a goal that came out of the comp plan and was focused again on the downtown master plan. And I think certainly the commercial market study was focused on helping support this in the future. So this, it was underway, but it has been completed and was a little delayed with COVID, but is now up and had its full grand opening this past summer and up and running and had some good excitement around it. And we're sure that this is going to help spur things in the future. So just wanted to call that out. So this is another our most recently approved mixed-use project, and this is on the UMB site. It has been approved, and I'll admit this is not the best rendering in my opinion, but this shows this was one of the sites that was identified in the downtown master plan as underutilized. It's vast suburban type or ex-urban even type retail bank facility, outdated, too much space, too much service parking. And so this is one of the sites that we heard immediate interest in after doing our planning processes, and the bank actually went out on their own with an RFP to redevelop and saw the potential. So this is the biggest one we've had so far that came through. So it's a 5-story, 4 floors of residential, over 1 floor commercial, and structured parking in the back. There's about, I think it ended up at about 7,500 square foot of commercial on the first floor, including a space for UMB Bank, and then other tenants on the first floor. Obviously, you see plaza space in the front, 152 units. So there was a lot of the desire to see, the vision was really set through these planning processes that allowed. Now this project, if any of you paid attention, was still controversial, right? It's 60 feet in height. It's the tallest that our code allows. They actually proposed 76 feet to start with 6 stories, and it went through the process and was revised and revised again, and came down in height. It is denser. Luckily we have flexibility in our code right now, which gives some discretion to the city council. So it does have more residential units than prescribed by code currently, but they were able to modify that based on public benefit. So they incorporated a lot of the visioning and placemaking opportunities there will be a public use easement over the plaza. They'll create a mid-block crossing into the site on the north side, so that there's a future connection potential to the east and to the north. They're also going to do some improvements, propose to do some improvements on the public street with a mid-block pedestrian crossing across Kirkwood Road, still to be designed, but it's a condition of their approval to fund that, as well as other traffic calming. So we were able to negotiate, if you will, to get some public benefit out of the project, and it was seen to follow the vision of our plans. You can go on to the next one. All right, so get into try to go through, let's see, I think we're started a little late, so we're about 40 minutes in. So other pieces, really initially, directly after the downtown master plan was complete, that plan gave us some what they call code hacks or code acupuncture of really low-hanging fruit that we could do and start to look at immediately. And then the PGAV study as well further supported those, and then provided additional fine-tuning to some of those recommendations with the framework plan. So one of the first amendments, so I'm going to focus on the code amendments here as we've implemented them. So I mentioned earlier, we created multifamily as a permitted use in our B2 downtown district, subject to the framework plan, right? And so again, that was important to make sure people understood that we studied and understand that commercial is important and where it's important in downtown, but that there's a good, that multifamily is in residential downtown certainly has its benefits. So go ahead. Right, we also tried to streamline many of our processes and actually After all of these studies, we did a complete overhaul of our zoning and subdivision code, 300 pages of code that went through. And during that process, we converted a lot of special uses to permitted uses with standards, created a new category, trying to highlight what the usual conditions were from our special uses or conditional use permits, as other communities call them. So we tried to encapsulate those, say, okay, if these are the ones we're always applying, if we make those standards that apply, but make it a permitted use, is everybody comfortable? We were able to do that successfully for a lot of uses. Go ahead, Amy. Another big piece, and Catherine mentioned wanting to extend the feel of downtown, the pedestrian orientation of the historic downtown, both south and northward. And we brought up the idea of prohibiting drive-through restaurants because those typically traditionally don't orient themselves to the pedestrian. And our Planning Zoning Commission, City Council grasped onto that, agreed, and took it further. We were just talking about drive-through restaurants as the big offenders in staff's opinion, but they said no drive-through, dry cleaners, restaurants, even banks currently. So we've had some that got under the gun and came in. Commerce Bank was doing a new project, and before this prohibition went in, they were allowed drive-through. And I think that will, in all honesty, that'll probably morph over time. We'll probably try to get it more focused on form, such that if the drive-through is completely enclosed or something like that, it would have potential. But right now, we wanted to not perpetuate vehicular oriented uses. So go ahead. Right, so we also increased the density allowed for mixed use projects in downtown. Not a huge increase, but it was, it's not insignificant, from 36 dwelling units per acre to 43 dwelling units per acre. And again, as I mentioned, we do have flexibility in the code at the discretion of the council based on public benefit and other areas going above and beyond on certain things that can be flexed. Does provide for a lot of interesting and controversial conversation, but it was a good change. So next. Again, with on DPZ's urban design focus, we created new street frontage occupation and maximum setbacks. So there were setback requirements, and we would always average the adjacent buildings or buildings down the street to try to make sure it was fitting in. But in this process, we eliminated the minimum setbacks so that zero setback is allowed in the downtown district, and actually created a cap based on, there's two areas, a central downtown and an outer downtown, phase 1 and phase 2. So buildings have to be no more than 20 feet. They have to be at least 20 feet or closer to the street in the central area, and then 51 feet or closer in the outer area. And that also correlates with the fact that they have to occupy so much of the street frontage. So some interesting form-based elements that we implemented in kind of the hybrid. Go ahead. We did also adjust after the parking demand study. A big piece was to adjust our parking requirements. Downtown Kirkwood for a long time has had a exemption for existing buildings downtown to encourage reuse of existing buildings. So if you're just reusing and not expanding a building, parking wasn't, additional parking wouldn't be required. But beyond that, we also wanted to make sure that our parking requirements, there were recommendations to require, and the way we have it set up now is we require less parking in downtown, even for addition and new building projects as opposed to other places in the city. So we also had a shared parking table for mixed use that was really fine-tuned and given some greater detail to highlight the fact that there's economies of scale gained by those mixed use developments, and the fact that they can share parking based on usage on time of day. And then lastly, we created, it's brand new and it might not be getting used as much downtown, but I want to focus on the housing aspect again. We also created a whole new zoning district for missing middle housing. So we didn't rezone any property proactively, but we allow property owners now in transition areas between commercial or denser uses and single family to propose this missing middle housing, because before we just had single family districts and multifamily districts. And so this provides a in between where it's capped at roughly 6, maybe units per building based on the form, or per lot based on the form. So we have been busy since these studies. And again, none of these I'm sure are perfect, and we fully expect to be tweaking them throughout. But we feel like we've had a lot of good momentum going forward. I will also say the hotel information Catherine mentioned, while we don't have a boutique hotel yet downtown Kirkwood, we've used that as often as we can whenever we have interest in a developer from saying, hey, I just want to do something. What are your ideas? The hotel's at the top of our list. We now have the information that PGAV provided about, you know, the minimum market that they think, number of rooms that could be supported, et cetera. So that's been another big piece from a marketing perspective from the city. So what I always say is, summarizing what we've done so far is, if nothing else, get out of the way, right? We don't want the zoning regulations to be in the way. And while they are regulations and some of them still are in the way, we're definitely striving as much as we can to getting out of the way, especially of implementing the vision that the community has. So let's see, I think that brings us to the end. Catherine and Amy, did you have anything
You
else?
actually had one more bullet point at the bottom that I just pulled up.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. So as part of our code update project too, we also aligned our architectural standards. So previously the architectural standards were by zoning districts, but as you can imagine, we have multiple zoning districts downtown. Doesn't always accommodate consistency. So rather than going by zoning district, we created geographical districts. So and really extended our downtown to be historic, still having its own higher level of requirements and design, but extending elements, bringing elements, incorporating elements of the historic downtown further out all along Kirkwood Road, all the way from Manchester Road to Big Bend, to make sure that we're carrying on those strengths. So we just realigned those architectural standards as well. Thanks, Amy.
All right, thank you, Jonathan, Amy, and Catherine for your presentation. We will now have the Q&A portion, which you can put your questions in the chat. I do want to let everyone know that we know there were some technical difficulties with Eventbrite, and so we had some people who were joining late or possibly weren't able to join. This is being recorded and will be posted to the section's website. We'll get that up as quickly as possible and shoot out an email probably to let people know that it's up. So just want to head off that question. If anyone was curious about that, it will be recorded and posted to the website. So please, if you have any questions for our three presenters, go ahead and put those in the chat. Or if you want to just unmute yourself and chime in, you're welcome to do that. Okay, so we have our first question. Jonathan, you said that the new development got an increased density. What was the final unit density per acre?
All right, I'm gonna have to do some reverse math. So we used to calculate density on, let's see, number of units per lot area. So they went down from 1,000 square feet per unit of lot area to, I think it was 750. So somebody else can probably do that. 43, 5, 60. So they were about 58 units per acre is what is the modification that they were granted. So it was about a 25% increase from what the code allowed. And obviously from a planning perspective, the way we try to frame that discussion, if you will, is because a lot of people just see the numbers and say it's too dense. Well, we were really trying to get people to talk about, well, what about the density? Because it's not the size of the building, right? Because if the units were twice as big and the building was still the same size, is that your concern? Because then the concern is not density, right? It's building size. If you're concerned about traffic, we had a traffic study done, right? If it's about utilities, we've gotten comments from all the utilities. And so it was just trying to make sure we didn't have just the general opposition to something denser than what we have now. And I will say that we also, there's still concern and a contingency that just says, if that's the code, why are we considering anything else? But our council has been pretty, the majority of the council at least has been pretty supportive of the fact that if we want to be, if we want to get cool and fun and neat things and stay relevant, we need to have some ability to consider things that might be just outside or a little bit outside our written requirements. So. On that project too, it's called the James, it was Kirkwood Flats for a while on the UMB site. So I mentioned they went from 76 feet to 60, dropping a story. They also went down from 176 units to 152. It actually, those changes happened after the P&Z. So it got a split vote at our P&Z commission. It was 4-4 at our P&Z commission. And then they responded by removing, well, they had already removed the story, but reducing the number of units and proposing that change as it went forward to our city council, because our process does require city council review. So they reacted to the feedback provided, and then it ultimately did get a positive vote by the city council after those changes.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. Again, if you have any other questions for the group, please go ahead and put those in the chat, or if you feel like just taking yourself off mute and chiming in, you're welcome to do so. We'll give a few more moments here. In the meantime, I'll let everyone know that the board has talked about doing some sort of holiday happy hour. We have not come to any conclusions about that yet. It's still in the works, but we will keep people aware of that through the newsletter. So keep an eye out for more information on that. Looks like we did get one more question. Have other developers expressed an interest in building new housing around downtown Kirkwood as a result of these plans and code changes?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I can't say for certain that it's just the result of the plan and code changes, but since these things have happened, we have seen others. So other than the project talked about, there was another proposal on the Commerce Bank site. They did a similar thing. They're one block south, have a lot of area. There was a mixed use proposal on that site. It unfortunately was denied because the residential portion was going to be assisted living, and that wasn't currently a use available in our downtown district, and it wasn't something that the city council ultimately thought was overall going to contribute to the success of downtown. So there have been discussions still. I know Commerce Bank, last I understand, they're still looking at, they actually went through with subdividing the property, portioning out a third for themselves to develop, and then they're still marketing the other 2/3. But also throughout, we've had the total of 3 buildings just south of City Hall that actually, the first one started was before these processes. There was a 12 units multifamily building built as a mixed use, 2-building mixed use development that also went through some text amendments to make that project happen. And that same developer, in conjunction with, along the timelines, and actually was one of the impetus for the well, at the timing of it, we added multifamily as a permitted use after these studies, and it was the same time that their project was coming through. So they've done 2 additional buildings, one with another 12 units and one with another 14 units. Those all have been, the second one is complete now, the third one is under construction. They are all condos. And in full disclosure, they're upper end condos, right? They're not affordable, but they're owner occupied housing units. And then we had another 3 to 4 unit building that was approved as well, further up Clay. So we've seen a little bit of this interest from the infill, as well as still talking developers for mixed use larger projects as well.
All right. Any last minute questions? Go ahead and feel free to interrupt me or throw something in the chat. Otherwise, I want to thank our presenters again for this great presentation today. Their contact information is up here on the screen. And I'll go ahead and speak for them and say that I'm sure they would be happy to answer more questions if they occur to you later. Nods. Okay, cool. All right. Well, then I think we will wrap things up. Like I said, keep an eye out for information on a potential holiday gathering, happy hour of some sort. Otherwise, we wish everyone a very happy, healthy, safe holiday season. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.